Back the tape up 3 weeks. Back the tape up 4 weeks. 155 pounds. Khabib versus Gaethje. Chandler's in the batter's box. Off we go. Khabib walks away. So you're left with a vacated title. Fast forward, Dana White does not accept the vacancy. Spoke with Khabib. Thinks Khabib is coming back. Okay, great. In the meanwhile, Conor McGregor versus Poirier gets announced. So now you still are left with, what do we do with Chandler? By the way, Tony Ferguson's looking for something to do by the end of the year. So you start to hear some talks that it's going to be Chandler versus Tony. We know it's going to be Conor versus Poirier. What we don't know is that going to be for the belt? Because Dana has not accepted Khabib's vacancy. Spoke to him, thought maybe it was in the moment, wanted to show respect to Khabib, going to give him a little bit of time. In the meanwhile, keep the belt around his waist. That's where we were at. Now, that's a lot of moving parts, but in all fairness, that's more fun. Guys, isn't it more fun when we don't know? When we don't know, in conjunction with, well, what if, or it should be this, when we have a whole bunch of those in one division, that division's in a damn good spot. So the only thing we know about 155 pounds dating back for the last month is it's in a good spot. Well, now we got a little bit more clarity, which is Chandler will not be fighting Ferguson because Oliveira is. That still leaves you with a void of what is Chandler going to do? And I was confronted with information which I did not like at all. At all. And I'm the first to speak up for Michael Chandler, but I will not be happy if this turns out to be true. And I don't have evidence that it is, in all fairness. I don't. I only have rumor. Generally, there's a rumor in this sport. If somebody does not come on the other side of it and deny the rumor is then believed to be true. It doesn't mean that it is. It's believed to be true. And I only want to disclose that because the way the story goes as of right now is that Michael Chandler was offered Tony and said no. He said no because he had a training camp. Wait, what? Let me re-say that. I must have misspoke. He said no to a fight because he had a training camp. That still doesn't sound right. Let me say this one more time. He said no to the fight because he had a training camp. Wait a minute. Wouldn't that be a good thing? Many guys throughout history, we have let off the hook of do something because they didn't have a training camp. Or they went out and did it and they didn't look their best and we gave them a quick pass and sometimes even gave them a rematch with appropriate training camp. But it all has to do because they didn't have the training camp. Now, while that will work with the masses, that will never work with the locker room. When one of the boys comes out and tells the media, I was not training and therefore tonight didn't go well, the rest of the boys will all let it slide. Because we know that we're going to use that same lie at some point to justify a bad performance, and we don't want called out on it. But within the back, we all know you just got stomped. Of course you're training. It's all that you have to do. You don't have any other job. You don't have anything else to do. You don't even have another social life except to go to the gym. We're in training all the time. But when the narrative fits and you need to go to the masses and say that you weren't training, we not only will let you go, we'll even back you up. In exchange, you back us up with the next time we stub our toe and just continue it to perpetuate the false narrative of a training camp. Chandler allegedly has done the opposite. He has turned down a fight because he had a training camp. And I'm coming to you guys and I'm telling you that I cannot back this up because I don't want this to be true. But there is a part of me that feels that it is true with the evidence that Ferguson, who was Chandler's idea in the first place, has now been booked with somebody else that isn't named Michael Chandler. So what is Chandler going to do? Wait until he doesn't have a training camp? Wait until he has another training camp? The guy's fought like 25 men. Which would constitute 25 camps, which would constitute what the hell's a training camp in the first place? I mean, what does that actually mean? And particularly when I'm hearing it from a multiple-time All-American who never even used the word camp until he got into the big leagues. A multiple-time Division I All-American who worked his whole life to be a national champion and got ever so close, never even used the word camp until he made it to the majors. It's a made-up word in the first place. It was made up by a bunch of boxers. That is a boxing term that made its way over to MMA, was resisted when it first came over, because MMA guys didn't actually have the money to go do a camp, to actually get in isolation where the lodging is here and the food is here and the training's here and you're just going to repeat. You couldn't even do it. So when you tried to say you were in camp, it was a fake word if you're using it as a derivative of the sport that you stole it from, who actually went into camp, into the mountains. They didn't have cell phones and computers and television and a newspaper coming each day. They actually went into isolation. It didn't provide for any better of a product. It just allowed you to make movies like Rocky. Nobody actually did any better, including Michael Chandler, who's gone all the way to world championships, who never even used the word. It was a multiple-time Division I All-American. Now, apparently, he has to have a training camp, or he doesn't fight because he had a training camp. I can't even say it out loud. I don't want it to be true, but it appears that it is just that, considering Ferguson is now going to fight Oliveira, but you're still left at, what does Chandler do? A lot of the pieces just came off the board. Does he go back into the batter's box for Conor Poirier? I don't know. That'd be a little bit weird. It'd be a little bit silly, but turning down a fight because you had a training camp, right? I mean, if we're just saying nonsensical things and hoping that something sticks, I guess we're on that spot. Do you put them all the way out? I mean, cards are backed up right now. They're backed up to March, and many fights are already booked through March. So what do you do with this fight? If it's a non-important fight, if it's not going to be a feature fight or a headline or a co-main event, you could do a number of things with it. If it is going to be a feature bout and it's going to be a headline or a co-main event, who else coincides with that time frame? Do we come back to Gaethje? If you were to ask me right now, with the information that we have right now, it would appear as though Gaethje is the best possible option for Chandler, unless we're just going to knock this Chandler ball so far down that it doesn't even matter. If Chandler is not in the ring with somebody by June of next year, he no longer matters. And the same with anybody else. The only fortune cookie I've ever gotten in my whole life that I remember what the fortune was said, success is something that people have to be reminded of often. And the only reason I remember it is because the only fortune cookie that was so true. It's so true. It does not matter how good you are. If you are not out there reminding people of it often, and the only commodity that you have within this sport is your performance. So if you're not out there competing and performing often, you're not reminding people. If you're not up until June of next year, nobody's even going to remember you or care. And that goes for any division and anybody. So let's say that he fights prior to June, but we know that cards are already blocked until March. Who's he going to fight and where? And if it's not a featured bout or a co-featured bout, if it's just somewhere on the card, we can solve the problem. But it sure seems a lot to ask of a guy who was just brought to a different continent, put in the batter's box, could step in for a world title fight at any given moment, did everything right, then as Tony Ferguson saying, I'd like to do something this year, and you said no because you had a training camp. A two-time Division I All-American who had never used that word before competed with a different person every single Saturday of his life for 4 straight years and made weight every single time before he did it. For 4 straight years, never used the word. Is now using the word that was taken from a different, so I don't even know where camp ever came into this sport. I mean, in all fairness, talk about gag me with a Smurf. What's that quarterback you were telling me about with the Patriots? It's not Manning. Tom Brady. What if Tom Brady was supposed to play on any given set, but he had to have a camp first? I mean, aren't a few of us going to look around and go, you know, Tom, you're 41 years old. You've been throwing the ball for a few years now. There's really not a camp. Get in there. The guy in the guy in the striped shirt has a whistle. When he blows it, do something with that ball.